friends, it's Michelle. Welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy you're here. Today I am going to be working in my ink swatch book that I just recently made out of a recycled pie crust box. If you're interested in that process, I will post the video below. I have been working with making and creating botanical inks in September and October, and then I wanted to be able to have a place that I could record my results for future seasons. So I thought the best thing I could do was have a swatch book. So I created this swatch book. So what I want to do today is show you how I'm going to set up those pages. You could, if you're not into botanical inks, you could be using something similar for, let's say, alcohol inks or Tim Holtz inks, oxide inks, and distress inks, inks that are in bottles. You could be using it for inks that you use in a fountain pen. You could even be using it for homemade watercolors or any kind of pigments or dyes that you're creating or that you use. And the benefit of having that is when you want to use a color, you can remember how it looks on paper, fabric, and other substrates. So what am I going to do today? What I'm going to do is I have pre-cut 2 sets of circles. I have pre-cut watercolor paper circles that are in the black, and then just a standard paper, like a standard journal paper. It's not the lightest paper, it's not the heaviest, it's just, I don't even know, probably like an all-purpose paper that I have. I figure the 2 of these fairly represent heavy mixed media papers versus regular papers. So on each page, I'm going to want to have one of these, one of each, so that I'm showing a heavier paper and a lighter paper. Then I pre-cut all these little pieces of muslin, and I'm going to want to have a piece of muslin. Now, what I think I'm going to do, I haven't quite decided. I think I may dip part of the muslin in a diluted version of the ink so that I can see what it would look like completely dyed, and then maybe I will do a couple like a couple droplets of it just to see at full strength what it looks like on fabric. That I have to decide as I go along. I also have a stamp that has this banner. I think this is going to be what I write the title of each ink's name in. I want it to be consistent on each page. So I will need an archival ink for that. And the reason why archival ink is important is because it will be permanent. So I'm going to do a brown and a black because I have a brown and a black here. So let's get started. I also have a fine line marker and some water and a watercolor brush that also has this shaper at the end. So let's see what we can do. So the first thing is I'm going to go into my swatch book and I'm going to remove the first signature and work in them. I am going to zoom out just a hair and we'll work on the first page. So the first thing I want to do is put my title on. Make sure that ink is nice, and then I'm going to use this. I actually need to put this on the line. That's the purpose of having the type of blocks that have lines on them, so that I know it's straight. Let me re-ink that. Okay, so I'm going to try to center this and press this title down like that. And then I'm going to let this dry just a minute, put that to the side. And the first one I'm going to use is my purple carnations that I had from a store-bought bouquet that my husband bought me. And I'm simply going to take the dropper and I'm going to put a drop in the center of the watercolor paper, in the center of this paper. Now the hard part is I can't put them in the book right away. I have to let them dry. So I have to remove them and put them somewhere safe to let them dry. And they may take a while because I may have to kind of see if I can push some of this ink around in the circle so it's not quite so thick. Or else it will take so long to dry. But I do want it to be dark in some areas because I want the dark side of the ink to show. I want the light and the dark hue. So the process of dyeing fabric is easy. You just take a little pot with a little bit of water and add your ink to it. If it's not strong enough, add a little bit more. Squish it around and then squeeze it out and see if you like the color that's on the fabric. Depending on the strength of your ink, you may have to do this dyeing process a couple of times. And then I'm going to allow this to dry. It wasn't a complicated process, but it occurred to me this would take a long time, unless I worked with all the inks at the same time by laying them out all in one place and letting them dry. So I decided to do like an assembly line. I took that mat and put the orange down first, and now I'll work with all the other colors. So now I'm going to do the second ink, which I believe is a marigold. It is. I'm going to shake it up to make sure everything is mixed. And then I'm going to take some water and I'm going to syringe up some water here, just a little bit. And I'm going to add some marigold color and then add a little piece of fabric. And I think you can see the color going on. I'll leave that in there for a second. And then I'm going to take 2 dots of the marigold on the paper. And I'm going to take this area and I'm just going to spread that out just a little bit. And now it's time to squeeze out all the dye out of the fabric and see what we have here. A really nice yellow. So put that to dry. So just a little note about dyeing your fabric. When you're doing your fabric swatches, you're going to have some colors that are very strong and you will not really, you'll need to dilute them a little. You would never dye them full strength. And then something light like the sunflower, I will do full strength because I know if I dilute it, I'll get no color. You have to gauge it yourself based on how strong your dye is. You can see at full strength how light this is. It will be a very nice, very subtle yellow, but you have to kind of figure out when you're dyeing your textile how you would actually use it, how strong you would use it, so that you can remember, so that you can get a good look, a good representation of that color. Okay, let's have that dry. And moving along, I put the clover down. I believe this was going to be in the green family, but honestly, it's a lot more yellow than green. However, as you're putting ink on your papers, you'll often notice that the color that you put down will change as it dries. Like as it dries, it will become darker or lighter and look more like the hue you expect. Or maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be a complete surprise. But here I am dyeing the fabric with the clover, which does look a little bit more yellow. We'll have to see when it's all dry what it looks like in the swatch book. So this is the process that's going to happen over and over with the different dyes. I'm doing them all at once, laying them down on that plastic mat, and then I'll fill in the book later once everything is dry. So here's the pokeberry. This is an example of an extremely vibrant dye that will need to be watered down for the fabric. It would be way too dark to, you could dye your fabric full strength. It'll be super, super potent, but I would probably take it down a bit so it's more like a pink than a very, very deep, deep purple. And if you ever wanted to have the variances in your fabric, you could just do the light first, like I'm doing here, the diluted, and then once it's dry, squirt a little bit more in the center, full strength, and then you'll have the different variations of color on your fabric. So here's that nice pink from the pokeberry. So I want to show you what I'm doing here. I'm setting this area up here, and move that out of the way. I'm actually putting the circles directly on the drying area so that I can not be shifting it around as much. Now, as you can tell, this pokeberry one, it ran, so I did another one and it ran. I'm going to leave it like that. I think that's super important for me to remember that when it's on plain paper, it runs. It did not run on the watercolor paper. And this is the fox grape I just poured, and I'm pointing this out to you because I want to show you the color it is when it finally dries. So you can see what I did is I was moving the circles directly to this mat so that I don't have to shift it around too much. I'm putting the ink on it like that. I don't want to do too many because I don't want to lose track of my head which inks are which. And as you can see, all these fabrics are a consistent tone. But what I want to point out is what you can do is wait for all these fabrics to dry and then put a dot of ink full strength in the middle so that you can get the variations of what full strength looks like versus concentrated. Now you're going to see that I demonstrate it here, but because the fabric is still wet, I'm not going to get that variation because it's just going to end up seeping into the fabric because it's wet. If you wait until it's completely dry, you'll get a better variation of dark to light. I hope that makes sense. And for those very light fabrics, you're never going to get a light to dark. It's just going to be one color. Like the sunflower, you can't make it darker than it is because it's just such a mild color as it is. And like any process, you learn to become more efficient and you learn as you go. So now I'm going to do the second half of my inks, and I learned so much already. I already have my workspace set up with the two little circles and the fabrics next to them. I do the dropper on the circles, and then I do my dyeing in the little pots. And I don't have to move the circles, so they're not going to bleed as much. And I have a little off camera, I have a little pot where I can dump the ink I just used in, and then another thing of water so I can rinse it, and I can just jump into the next color. And that's what I do over and over and over. And this time it was a lot more efficient, and I realized it's going to be really fun to make the swatch book, but not if I have to wait after every single time I do a color. So let me just do them all at once, and then I'll have all of the colors and the fabrics ready to go dry. So there's nothing more boring than watching something dry. So I'm going to finish swatching all of my colors, and then with the magic of video, come back when they're all dry. So here I am, friends, back the next day, and I now have all my fabrics are dry and all my little swatches have dried, and I have stacked them together. And one of the things I did just to make it easier, and this is a good little handy tip, which I should have done beforehand, but luckily I was able to figure it out after, is I put the name of the color of ink on the back of the swatches. And what I would suggest doing is before you write, before you use your swatch, however you're going to do it, if this was, let's say, a blank swatch, write the name of the ink first and then put it down and then do your swatching. That way, if they get mixed up or they blow off a table, you know which color is which color. So I have them all organized and now we're ready to go. So I'm going to start first with this one. This is the purple carnation, and I'm going to write it with a black pen right on the top here. And then underneath that, I'm going to write some details that I think are pertinent. So I'm going to write store bought carnations. This is water plus, I used alum on this, and I'm pretty sure I soaked these overnight. So I can remember how I did it. And then I want to take my glue stick, and my watercolor paper is on the black, is the black one. Put that one on this side, and this is the regular white paper. Now, this is a little messy, and I would have wanted to have it a little bit cleaner, but what this tells me is that this bled a lot. So that's important for me to know, that on the watercolor paper it bled a lot. It's fine. And then I'm going to put the fabric here. Now, I was thinking about it, and what I thought I would do is just put a little glue stick down, and let me trim those little frayed areas there. And I am going to sew this, but what I thought I would do is on this side, I would make sure that I had a piece of cloth so that it lines up. So the next one that I have was my marigold. Now, I didn't paint the swatch yet, so I need to do that. I'm just doing it lightly just to get a sense of what kind of tone it would get when I paint it. And I'll have to have that dry before I can write on it with my pen. And this is where I have an oopsie moment. And this is, again, I keep this in my video because I like to just throw out my process, even when it includes mistakes, to help you. What I noticed is I painted the front here, right? And then when I painted the back, it got really buckly. I really didn't like how it looked. It was all bubbly and buckly, and I felt like it ruined the page. So what I'm going to do is restart with a new page, fill in the information, and I am not going to paint the banner up there. I'll figure out a different way to handle that, because I do like to see the what it would look like as a tint or a watercolor, but I guess the back-to-back painting will not be a good solution here. What I notice is there's space underneath the fabric on every page, so I can always make a little watercolor tint swatch of each ink and place it there. And that's what I'll do moving forward. So this is the marigold. And I'm going to write on this one. So what I wrote was orange and yellow variegated petals, because I want to remember the variety of marigolds that they were from my garden in September. So now the same thing. I'm going to glue in the two swatches. This is the regular paper. And then this is the other paper. And then this is my swatch. And I'm going to kind of pick it up so I can see the light where the edge is. And I'm going to put down some glue. And again, trim those little bits. And as soon as that is dry, I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to put some stitches right across this, which will also stitch in this side. But it's not dry yet, and I don't want to screw up my machine. So I'm going to move on and then come back. So the process will be the same. I will write the plant. I will write the notes about how it was done. And then I will put a little piece of fabric down right underneath, like so. And then I'll move on to the next page. I may need to continue to put it in the signature just so I can be sure that I know which pages are going next to each other. And some of the pages I had not stamped because I had not decided whether I was going to do them back to back, but I have decided that's what I want to do now. So I did yellow, yellow. This one looks yellow, but it's actually the clover. I'm going to save that to go with the greens. And again, I can always move other pages in and out. So the question is, do you want to make them in order or by color? That's going to be up to you. If you think you want to do it by color, then maybe you want to leave a couple pages of yellow, you know, like a couple pages that are open so that you can throw another yellow in there. So maybe what I would do is at the end of a color, because I know I don't have any more yellows coming, I would keep this one blank and then start with my purples. That way, if I add more yellows later, I could take this page out and slide in another yellow page. I guess it depends how you want to do it. I guess because it's on the back of a yellow, I'm actually going to keep that blank. I'm not going to fill that one in, and I'm going to start with purples. Okay, so I have my pokeberry here. So originally in this video, I had commentary for every page, but I just don't think it's necessary for you to hear all of that. It would make the video very long, and the process is the same. Having said that, there are a few things to mention. As you can see on this fox grape, the two colors are very different on different papers. I want to bring that up because this is one of the reasons a swatch book is important, because you can tell with this particular ink, the paper makes a difference on how the color shows. Working on my Morning Glory page, I was reminded that Morning Glories are something I plant every year, and I'm unsure if the color will change based on the year and how prevalent different colors are in that year's batch. So I want to make sure I add more pages to it. I also am showing you the variation in the fabric, the blue and the purple that shows up in the fabric, and how interesting that is. So because Morning Glories are something I grow every year, I'm going to make sure that I leave blank space in the middle so I can do several batches of Morning Glory to see if it changes. A little planning will give me the ability to track different inks that I'm going to make over and over. Another thing I'd like to mention as far as planning your swatch books is when you use different mordants, you might want to plan to have the pages side by side. So in this case, I'm taking the two avocado inks. One is made with alum and the other is with washing soda. The differences are very subtle. But by making sure that I do the swatch pages side by side with them, I'll be able to compare the differences and be able to see for the future which one I prefer when making the ink. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and I'm just going to put stitches in the pieces of fabric in a straight line, and I'll be back. Okay, so we have the signature, which you can see now has got some thickness to it because the cloth is in it. And now I have my different swatches. And again, I left pages where I knew I would add, like I'm going to add another yellow there at some point. And then this is purples and blues. And I know I'm going to do more morning glories. And then these are avocados, clover, zinnia, and so this one is done. So then this signature, and I sewed it and put things in with an eye to the future, planning to the future. So I have lamb's ear, and then I have blank pages because I'm assuming I'll put more greens next year. And then these are 2 blackberries, and you can see that see how different the colors are? That means I did one with washing soda and one with alum. And guess what? I didn't write down which was which. I mean, I made 2 bottles and I never wrote it on the bottle, so I have no idea. So next year when I make blackberry, I will match them up. I'll make up a batch in with alum and washing powder, and I'll match up which one is which, and then I'll write it in. But at least I know that these are the variations I can get from blackberry. I also picked the blackberries in July and froze them. I wrote that down because next year I'll make it with them fresh and see if that changes the color at all. Then I left a bunch open because I'm going to try blackberry fresh next year. So see, I'm planning for the future in mind. Then I have nasturtium and black nightshade. I'm trying to keep hues similar, and then my hickory hulls. And then I have room for growth. So that is my inks for this year. So when I put them in the book and slide them back in, here they are. And I won't have to slide the whole signature out ever again. If I want to add to this book, let's say, I can just slide this one page out if I want to. And then I can slide that one page back in. Same with the center here. So as you can see, now I have this, my swatch book, and I can go in and I can quickly flip and see what colors make what shades from my inks. The only thing I think I'll still add to this is I think I will take a piece of this paper and I will brush the colors on and then cut them out, and then I may add them to the bottom of the page so that I can see what if I painted with the color, what it would look like. These swatches are pretty, they're made, as you saw, with a dropper, so they're pretty concentrated, dark colors, but a light swash of color, I'd like to see what that looks like. But we saw how that makes the page look like it buckles it up, and I don't want to buckle it up, so I'm gonna do it on a separate page and then glue it in. So that finishing touch I handled by painting all the little colors on a piece of paper and labeling them on the side so I knew the color, and then taking a rubber stamp and stamping it over the swatch so it made a nice little rectangle. And then all I had to simply do was cut out these rectangles and glue them in my book on their appropriate page. And then that inks page was complete. So here it is. Here is the book completed with all the little paint swatches. I ended up, as you saw in that image that I just showed, I ended up swatching with a paintbrush, just all the different colors, and then I took a smaller rubber stamp and just rubber stamped around it and cut them out. And as you can see, there's quite a variation between the regular paper, the watercolor paper, the fabric, and then the paint swatch. The same ink, just on different substrates and different concentrations, makes such a big difference. So it's so important to have this reference. So I've organized the books by color to a certain extent, as you can see, with the different fabrics and colors on there. And I've left room where I know I want to add another color, or where it makes sense to slide a page in and out. That way I can add yellows there. If I put a purple on the other side, then I'd be a little stuck unless I put a yellow there. So just trying to organize it the best I can moving forward. I have my pokeberry. You can see all the different fabrics, and look at the color variations on these. These are just really amazing to see how much blues and the blues on paper, but on fabric, they're really more purple. Just fascinating to see the substrates. And because I grow so many morning glories, I have left room for more purples and morning glories. This is avocado, which with the two treatments, there are subtle differences, but really not that much, as you can see. I've started my greens here, and I can slip more paper in there. And then in this signature, I'm doing a lot more of browns and blacks, more neutrals, and I've left pages in there so I can add to it. This is the blackberries I've done, and you can see the difference between washing soda and alum, which, as you know, I am not sure which one is which because I didn't label it, so I'll have to wait till I make another batch to figure that out. And I also don't know, because I used frozen berries, if that will affect color. So I have left some pages there for me to experiment. A lot of these things I won't be able to do till next year because we are now heading into the winter months and nothing is growing. But I will be able to continue to collect some nuts and hulls. So I'm hoping over the winter to still be able to do like maybe acorns and pine cones. And I still have a whole signature afterwards to work through. So I just really enjoyed working in this journal. I hope you enjoyed the creation of it, the creation of the inks, and how I'm creating this swatch journal. I hope it inspires you to think about making your own inks or using inks you already have and making a little reference book for them. Thank you so much for joining me. If you found this video helpful at all, I hope that you will hit the like button below, and I would love for you to subscribe. Until the next video, take care and happy crafting.